Welcome back to the channel DIY Mechanics of the Internet. Ho! On today's cloudy and windy day outside, the project at hand is doing spark plugs on the C-Max. And I'm doing spark plugs because I'm assuming the ones currently installed are OEM from when the vehicle was new in 2013. And here in 2026, and right now as the C-Max sits here, it's got 140,000 miles on it. So I'm assuming the spark plugs need to be changed. The only concern that I have is after the age is if the coil pack boots are kind of heat welded to the ceramic coating or to the ceramic of the spark plug. Outside of that, it should be a very straightforward process. So let's get into it. All right, from what I remember when I did the oil change, getting this air intake out was going to be a pain in the ass. And the air intake tube right here was pretty much kind of in the way. So I'm wondering if I can loosen these two bolts up here and right down here. That's what I'm wondering. What size are these? Well, that's not an 8. Watch it be a 10. The only thing is those bolts look to be pretty rusty and they might not come out. They might break. So, gotta be ginger here. Well, if it's not an 8, it's not a 10, that means it's gonna be a 9. Yeah, that's gonna be a 9. Let's try the 9. No, a 9 isn't gonna work either. Well, it's gotta be an 8. Why is this? It is an 8. There's just a lot of corrosion on it. And this 3/8" drive is probably too big. Let's try a ratcheting 8. Nope, wrong way. Well, that came out pretty easy then. The other one is on this side in a little bit more open of an area. Kind of. This one might actually allow me to use the ratchet. Arguably the ratchet's too big for this spot, but that's all I have at the moment. Until I get the bolt out and I can put the wrench down there. Well, at least it was a wrench that fell, not an actual bolt. Where did it go? Now this piece should come undone. Kind of like that. Let me set that to the side. Is this going to be an 8? Nope, that's going to be much smaller. Well, that was a 9. Is this going to be an 8 or do I need to get a flathead? I'm going to need a flathead. The next task is I need a pick to remove this air hose to the throttle body, pick the red tab right here up and disconnect the mass airflow sensor, and then remove this PVC tube And then this tube can come undone. Okay, so this unscrews simply, and this unscrews simply. Check. And now to remove this, the object is to take the gray piece where my thumb is at, push it towards you, and push down, and then push up, or pull up, without breaking it. And then my Christmas tree that's right here is already broke because somebody's already been here. If you got a pick, use a pick and gingerly lift up this red tab, and then this whole connection point pulls up. Be careful that you don't break the tab or that you don't break this wiring, because that's your mass airflow sensor. Now, we got 2 bolts to remove, one right here and one right here. I believe these are an 8. There we go. Okay, now this hose comes apart. Should be able to pull it towards you. There we go. Like so. Now you could just twist it out of the way like this. Just make sure you don't drop debris inside the hose. Or you can remove the hose entirely. Just make sure you don't drop any debris in your throttle body. Now this entire unit then pops up, and from my frustration remembering, this was a bitch to get out. Which is not any different now. And it's a pain because you're fighting plastic pogo sticks, like this one right here behind the inverter cooler reservoir. And there's not really any clearance between this air filter box and the engine cowl to lift it fully up off those pegs and pull towards you. So you're kind of like fighting everything. See this pin back here where my finger's at? There's also one that's right here. And they mount in these little areas, here and here. And that's what you're fighting to get the air box out. Now, I'm going to gingerly look everything over and what the fudge? I'm gonna get my air hose and I'm gonna blow everything out. So before I move any one of these coil packs, I'm just gonna blow all this debris out of here. Now that I've blown everything away, I'm going to start here and work my way left. I'm going to do one cylinder at a time. That way it mitigates any potential chance of something falling down inside the cylinder. So this first one, I'm gonna get a deep socket for that. I don't have a deep socket, so for this first one, actually what I can do is disconnect these wiring harnesses, or these connectors. So I'm gonna push down on the tab. I don't think these have a locking tab, do they? Push down and pull back. Just be careful that you don't break your wiring. And then I'm going to use this ratcheting wrench. Then I'm going to use this ratcheting wrench to break this loose. And these should be pretty straightforward to break loose. They shouldn't be sticking at all. Just be careful with your connectors. The plastic is fragile, the wiring is going to be fragile, given the age of your vehicle, that you don't inadvertently snap a wire. And this should just slide on out, like so. With the boot removed, I'm gonna blow this hole out, just in case. And then I'm gonna put this down in there. And then hopefully break this free. Ooh. Or not. I would do this part gingerly. You don't want to strip the socket or the threads of the spark plug. So you want to take this part nice and slow. And there's our spark plug. Now, the gap on Motorcraft is predetermined and is not adjustable. But I think the gap is like 0.052. Now, on an iridium plug, you do not want to use a coin style gauge to do the gap. But I'm going to use one to see how much the gap is and see if I'm really off on the gap or not. Not really. Maybe these were replaced at one point, because, well, we're over 0.52. We're like 0.053, maybe 54. Took the rubber out of my socket here. So now I need to okay. And let's see what spark plugs. Oh, this one looks pretty bad. Got a lot of corrosion right there. So these are probably original. Now the ones I'm using are SP-530. So this is the new spark plug, AFY S332, AYF S32YR. So we have the original spark plugs, and the new ones are the same. Now installing these, I don't put any C's or anything on the threads. But I am going to start this by hand. and then get a torque wrench and torque it down to the final spec. Trusty torque wrench. Alright, now we torque this to 133 inch-pounds. There we go. Oh. All right. Listen here, buddy. Oh, son of a bitch. The problem is, I might need to get some meat on those pliers. Damn it. And get my boot that goes inside the spark plug. Or I'm taking this spark plug back out to get that boot off. Come on. That damn thing. Now, it comes time to put the boot back on. And I'm gonna wipe whatever grease was on the edge of this. And what I'm going to do is use a Q-tip and put a dab of dielectric grease on the inside of the boot, not on. So what I'm going to do is go on the outside diameter here, on the inside. I don't want any grease touching the coil spring because dielectric grease itself is not conductive. Although there is enough voltage or enough power for the current to jump from the spring through the grease to the spark plug, why create that resistance? And then we just seat this. We also want to inspect, make sure it's not ripped or anything. Make sure you don't need any new boots or anything. And then just put this back down in there. And then you get your bolt and put it back down, and this gets torqued to 71 inch-pounds, although objectively 71 inch-pounds is pretty light, so you could probably just do it by hand. And then make sure you do your reconnect. And we move on to the next one over. Okay, now this one should be able to use a socket. And oops, that's probably too big. And break this loose. There we go. And this one. Oh. Well, do you see that? That shouldn't have any black stuff around it, that's for sure. Do a quick wipe off of that. Okay. And then we need our spark plug guy here. Oh, let's blow out that hole real quick. There we go. Oh, hell. Well, that's not looking very good. It should not be brown like that. That kind of smells like oil. And this electrode is probably way out of gap too. Yeah, we're like 56. Put a new spark plug down in there. Well, shit. Well, that looks like what we're going to be doing constantly is fighting. I'm going to need a new spark plug socket. All right. There we go. And then I have to go fish out my rubber insert from the top of the spark plug. Like so. There we go. Okay. Clean our boot off again. Like so. A little bit of dielectric grease. Like so. And then we put this back down in there, like so. just snug this up like so. Plug this guy back in, and we move on to the next one. And then we rinse and repeat. Is my insert in there? Yes, it is. So I'm using a swivel spark plug socket, which can make doing spark plugs easier, especially if you have like a V6 and it's off canter. But for the straight 4 that's right here, I probably should have just stuck with this more solid one. And that spark plug really wasn't even tight. What is the gap on this guy? Let's see what our gap is. Well, this one's like 55, 56. So they definitely needed to be changed. They do look to be original. Oh, fudge. I need my little gripper thing. I would always recommend starting the spark plugs by hand so that you don't have any potential cross-threading of the spark plug threads with the cylinder head threads. And then we just torque it down to spec. And the torque spec is what? So the box says the torque spec is 7.2 to 14 foot-pounds. But I looked up and it was like 11 foot-pounds or 133 inch-pounds. So I'm using 133 inch-pounds. Like so. And of course I have to go chase the grommet out. Like so. Some dielectric grease on the end of our coil boot here. Like so. Inspect for damage. And then reinstall. There we go. And then reinstall our bolt. There we go. probably have too big of a ratchet for this. A smaller one would suffice. Snug. There we go. Reconnect our wiring. That one's done. On to the very last one. And this one has a little wiring harness loom on top of the bolt. So I'm going to use like a little pry tool and reach under here on this side by the solenoid right here and try and pry this little wire loom up, kind of like that. So you see this wire loom right here. Kind of just move that up and out of the way. I don't have a deep enough socket. Might have to disconnect the solenoid right here, and I don't think that's going to come undone. No, that's not going to come undone. Okay, so that just gives me some room. And I don't have a deep 8mm socket, so I'm going to have to kind of get a wrench in here, or push this guy all the way down on top, and then push this at the very top as leverage, a little bit of leverage, and then just kind of work this loose, just like so. It should be enough to loosen it by hand. So what I've done was, you see how the bolt's right there through the top of the socket? So I just put my extension. See how my extension doesn't go all the way in? I just had just enough bite right there to loosen this bolt. It works on bolts that don't have high torque on them. Pull the electrical connector, and this boot should just pop right on out. And this one has a little bit of grease right there. I wonder if that's from the factory, or if that's maybe somebody's done spark plugs for this at one point. I don't know. We set that right there. And we set that there. And then we get our spark plug socket removal. Put my insert down in there again. Put this down in there. And here we go. Oh, that's got some resistance to it. Well, come on. Oh. And this one looks to be the same. The spark plugs do look to be original. We have a green dot on top. I don't know if you're gonna see the green dot, but there's one there. And the gap on this one is 57, 56. So the spark plugs were definitely needing to be done. We get our last spark plug. And away we go. Oh, even the new ones have a green tip on them. Maybe somebody's done spark plugs already. So looking at the old one, you can really see how small that tip is compared to the new one. Okay. Insert our new spark plug. And hand tight. There we go. Now I gotta fish out my rubber grommet again. This one might be a challenge. There we go. And then we get some more dielectric grease. And we put this on the inside. Like so. Inspect the rest of the boot. I don't think there's going to be any issues with that. Boot looks fine. And now we just push this back down in there. And then we get our screw or our bolt. Where Where? I lost the bolt. What the fudge? How could I have lost the bolt? Oh. It's on the stupid socket. Anybody else have that same feeling before? Or is it just me? I need my little... There we go. Snug. Try that same trick right here on this guy. There we go. All right, put our little cap back on, make our connection, and that's it. All right, now with that done, I have to reassemble the air intake. Starting with putting this god-awful thing back in place. I hate this damn thing. I hate it, I hate it, I hate it. I hate it. I hate this fucking thing. There we are. Okay, now that's on. Reconnect our mass airflow sensor right here. Push the red locking tab down. Perfect. Reconnect our hose. Make sure there's nothing in our hose. Probably wipe out our throttle body. You'll have dirt like that in there. If you've got throttle body cleaner on hand, this would be a good time to kind of go in there and clean the throttle body so you don't have gunk like that. Clean your butterfly valve and everything. I don't have any cleaner on hand at the moment. But this goes on, rotate this over. Why does this not want to fit? What the heck? Really? Why doesn't this want to? Doesn't this? Well, that's not how that's supposed to work. Make sure that's clean. There we go. There we go. Now we just tighten that down. And tighten this guy down. Like so. Christmas tree goes back in the spot. Push this down, pull back up, make sure it's engaged. That part's done. The long one goes on the side. The short one goes right here. So we're just going to screw that in. And I'm sure there's a torque spec for this, but I'm just going to do hand tight. Okay. and this one on the side. That's nice and snug. Now put on, make sure there's no debris inside the air intake tube. Interesting. This just goes on like that and then sits right here. And I'm sure there's a torque spec for these bolts as well, but I'm just going to do it by hand. Oh, that gives me an idea. The idea was short-lived. The idea was if you had an extension, you could go right here and put your ratchet right here. Snug is snug. There we are. Well, give me back my wrench. Now, we turn it over. She definitely feels and sounds like it's running smoothly. That's for sure. All right. The project is done. Now, total time for this is about 30 minutes, give or take how much time it takes to pull this airbox off, and whether or not your spark plugs are easy or difficult to remove. Now, the procedure that I've shown here on my C-Max Hybrid is the same procedure for the C-Max Energy, as they have the same drivetrain. And it's also going to be the same procedure for the Fusion Hybrid and the Fusion Energy as well, as it has the same drivetrain. On that though, there's a bird that just flew very close to me. On that though, doing this on the Fusion is going to be easier because the Fusion has a larger engine bay, and removing this airbox, which in my opinion is the most frustrating part, will be vastly easier to do on the Fusion. However, in the manual, it does tell you, or it kind of guides you on how to remove this airbox. Yeah, use that with what you will. I didn't find it very useful. I just wanted to pull the airbox out, but that's just my opinion. Also in the manual, it does state which spark plugs to use. In here, it says to use SP-531, which is not the right spark plug. The right spark plug is SP-530. And with that, the torque specs for the spark plug will be, and the coil pack will be listed down in the description as well as the spark plug that I've used. Now, I had used Motorcraft spark plugs purchased from the big green and red automotive big box store. But I'm curious, I want to know, what do you use? Do you use OEM Motorcraft, or do you go with NGK? or Autolite. Do they still make Autolites? I don't know. Let me know down below. Now, let's watch me break a headlight. These are probably gonna be uberly expensive to replace. I have the warranty. Anyway, ow, the sun's in my face. It's actually on my head. Anyway, now, looking back at my results, yes, I did use a coin gauge, which isn't the most high precision tool to use for measuring the gap of spark plugs, but it's all that I had on hand. Let me know in the comments, do you use the coin gauge or do you use the feeler gauge to measure the gap of the spark plug? I only remember people using the coin gauge way back when I was knee-high to a plant. But the gauge that I use does give me a rough estimate about how far out of spec these spark plugs were, and they're about 8 to 10%. Factory spec is 0.051. These are like 0.056, 57, I think there was a 55 in there. They were pretty well used up. Did I need to change them right now? Probably not. Realistically, I'm looking at a tiny fraction of MPG loss, and is that measurable? Maybe. If you're hyper-miling and hyper-analytical, focused on a spreadsheet, and you're tracking how much fuel you fill up every time you do to calculate your MPG, probably could measure that tiny fraction, but you probably wouldn't notice this MPG loss in day-to-day driving activities. I will say this, currently right now, my C-Max does 35.2 miles per gallon. These are supposed to do like 47 miles per gallon. I have a lot more work to do. I gotta look at my brakes, I think are dragging, the CV axle or the CVT transmission fluid needs changed. I have a lot more work to do. Nonetheless, I changed the spark plugs because the user manual says to change them at 100,000 miles. And currently I'm at 140,000. I think I was 40,000 when I changed these, and right now I'm at 141,000. The car wasn't misfiring and it wasn't running rough, but here's the real lens to look through. The wider gap in these original spark plugs forces the coil pack to work harder to push this current through the spark plug. And in my opinion, spending 50 bucks on a fresh set of spark plugs today is a whole lot cheaper than replacing potentially stressed out coil packs further down the road. To me, replacing these plugs now is cheaper insurance. But what I want to know is, what do you, the community, think? Would you run these plugs another 10,000, 15,000 miles? I mean, maybe it is a hybrid. And what about if you have the energy and you're mostly driving EV? My i3, my BMW i3, it is the Rex version of the i3. It's got 188,000 miles on it right now, and my Rex generator doesn't get used a whole lot, but I'll probably go through and replace those spark plugs. So if you have the energy version of the C-Max and you're mostly driving EV, could you go 200,000 miles and not have to replace the spark plugs? It's a valid question. My camera died, so I don't know where I left off. The joys of filming outside in the sun. What I want to know then is, would you change them when the book says at 100,000 miles, or would you go later, 200,000, especially if you're driving the energy, or would you go sooner, like maybe 80 or 90,000 miles? I know, like on the Ford 5.4 liter Tritons, people change the spark plugs early because the longer they sit inside the cylinder heads, they end up breaking and changing them becomes a pain in the ass. On the 3.5 liter EcoBoost engines, people usually change them well before 100,000 miles because of it being a boosted engine and the spark plugs get followed up. So I want to know, what's your thoughts? What's your opinions? What do you do with your C-Max? Let me know in the comments down below. For more content posted this year, click this playlist. For more content about my C-Max, click the far playlist. And to subscribe, click the forward.